August 23, 1942. The air above Stalingrad trembles with a deafening roar, as if the heavens themselves are unraveling in fury and chaos. Hundreds of Luftwaffe bombers, sleek Heinkel He 111s, versatile Junkers, Ju-88s, and the infamous Junkers Ju-87 Stukas with their terrifying dive sirens darken the sky like a swarm of vengeful locusts descending upon their prey, their engines howling like a relentless storm of steel and destruction. In a single, intense day, 1,600 sorties unleash precisely 1,000 tons of bombs, a mix of high explosives that crater the earth and incendiaries that ignite everything in their path, engulfing the city in a massive firestorm, turning the mighty Volga River into a blazing, oil-slicked waterway where flames dance across the water like eerie reflections of the turmoil below. Stalingrad, once a thriving industrial powerhouse churning out tractors, tanks, artillery, and munitions essential to the Soviet war effort, becomes a vast landscape of smoldering ash, jagged rubble, twisted metal, and shattered lives. Its people, factory workers, families, soldiers, and civilians from all walks of life, trapped in a crucible of immense destruction, despair, and unyielding resolve. But why did the Third Reich, under Adolf Hitler's iron grip and strategic obsessions, believe this unprecedented aerial onslaught could shatter Soviet resistance once and for all, paving the way for a swift victory? How did a city bombed into near oblivion, its streets choked with debris, its skyline erased, and its population decimated, manage to defy the full might of the Nazi war machine for months on end, turning the tide of the Eastern Front? And what hidden secrets of human sacrifice, unyielding survival, raw resilience, and tactical ingenuity lie buried beneath the ashes of this cataclysmic event, forever known as 1,000 Tons of Hell? This documentary is for educational purposes and analyzes historical facts from a neutral perspective. It does not seek to glorify ideologies or incite hatred. We are strongly against violence and war in all its forms. This is the epic tale of how the Luftwaffe, the pride of the Third Reich and a symbol of technological terror, sought to obliterate Stalingrad from the map, and how the unbreakable spirit of a besieged city, forged in fire, challenges, and rubble, not only endured but ultimately altered the course of the Second World War, marking the beginning of the end for Hitler's dreams of conquest and reshaping the global conflict. To truly grasp the challenges that unfolded over Stalingrad, we must first delve deeper into the origins of this aerial operation, tracing back years before that fateful August day to the meteoric rise of the Luftwaffe as the Third Reich's aerial juggernaut, a force meticulously designed to dominate the skies and support military operations across Europe. Founded in 1935 in defiance of the Treaty of Versailles, which had forbidden Germany from possessing an air force after World War I, the Luftwaffe grew rapidly under the leadership of Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, a decorated World War I ace turned loyal Nazi enforcer, who envisioned it as the ultimate symbol of Nazi power, technological prowess, and ideological supremacy. By 1941, it boasted thousands of advanced aircraft, including the iconic Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers equipped with wailing Jericho trumpets engineered to sow psychological terror and panic among ground troops and civilians alike. The versatile Heinkel He 111 medium bombers capable of carrying up to 4,400 pounds of ordnance for devastating carpet bombing runs that could level entire districts, and the agile Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters that ruled the air with superior speed, maneuverability, and firepower, often outclassing opponents in dogfights. These machines had already proven their capabilities in the Blitzkrieg campaigns, the rapid invasions that overran Poland in 1939, Denmark and Norway in early 1940, and France, along with the Low Countries in mere weeks that same year, showcasing the Luftwaffe's ability to coordinate seamlessly with ground forces for quick advances. Stukas plunged from the skies like predatory raptors, delivering 500-pound bombs with pinpoint accuracy to disrupt enemy defenses and infrastructure, while He 111s unleashed waves of explosives that created chaos and disrupted communications, and Bf 109s secured air supremacy wherever they deployed. Göring, ever the boastful propagandist, famously declared that no enemy bomb would ever fall on German soil. But the Luftwaffe's true strength lay in its offensive capabilities. Short, decisive strikes that supported panzer divisions in rapid advances, embodying Hitler's vision of total war through speed and shock. Yet the Luftwaffe's ambitions reached their zenith, and ultimately their breaking point, on the vast, unforgiving Eastern Front. On June 22, 1941, Hitler unleashed Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history. 3 million Axis troops, bolstered by 3,600 tanks and 2,700 aircraft, surged into the Soviet Union with the explicit goal of seizing vast resources like Ukrainian grain and Caucasian oil. In the southern sector, General Oberst Wolfram von Richthofen, cousin to the legendary Red Baron Manfred von Richthofen of World War I fame, commanded Luftflotte 4, striking with ruthless, calculated precision that decimated Soviet airfields in preemptive raids. Within the first 48 hours, his forces destroyed over 2,000 Soviet aircraft, most caught helplessly on the ground due to Stalin's denial of intelligence warnings and the Red Air Force's disorganized state, granting the Germans near-total air dominance for the initial months. German panzer divisions, backed by relentless airstrikes from Stukas that targeted troop concentrations and supply columns, and He-111s that bombed railways and bridges, swept through Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltic states, capturing hundreds of thousands of prisoners in massive encirclements and vast swaths of territory that stretched to the gates of Leningrad in the north and Moscow in the center. By December 1941, they stood at Moscow's outskirts, their aircraft, adorned with the Black Iron Cross, a chilling emblem of terror, conducting over 1,000 sorties daily to disrupt Soviet regrouping, with pilots like Hans-Ulrich Rudel becoming aces through repeated missions. Luftwaffe pilots, elite aviators rigorously trained for precision, endurance, and tactical flexibility, flew multiple sorties daily, their cockpits buzzing with the adrenaline of victory and the hum of powerful engines. As historian Antony Beevor notes in his seminal work, Stalingrad, these early triumphs fueled Hitler's belief in the Luftwaffe's invincibility and the Soviet Union's imminent collapse, blinding him to the USSR's immense reserves of manpower, over 14 million mobilized, and industrial relocation to the Urals, where factories churned out weapons beyond German reach. However, Barbarossa's colossal scale exposed critical cracks in the Luftwaffe's foundation. Optimized for short campaigns in Western Europe, it struggled with the Eastern Front's immense distances, poor infrastructure, and overstretched supply lines that left airfields undermanned and under-equipped, foreshadowing the vulnerabilities that would culminate in Stalingrad. The turning point arrived with the harsh Russian winter of 1941 to 1942, a frozen landscape that halted the German advance and revealed the Luftwaffe's logistical frailties. Temperatures plummeted to -40 degrees Celsius, or even lower in exposed steppe air fields, freezing tank engines solid, jamming aircraft mechanisms with ice crystals, and causing significant challenges through frostbite, exposure, and related illnesses that affected unprepared troops. Luftwaffe ground crews, clad in inadequate uniforms designed for milder European climates and lacking proper winter gear, battled frozen fuel lines, brittle propellers that cracked under stress, and dwindling spare parts along supply chains that snaked over 1,000 miles from Germany through partisan-infested territories. Pilots, their hands frostbitten and numb despite heated cockpits, found aircraft grounded for days at a time, unable to take off in blizzards, sub-zero fog, or on icy runways that turned landings into deadly skids. As Richard Overy details in Russia's War, the Luftwaffe, built for blitzkrieg speed and short durations, was woefully unprepared for the Soviet Union's endless expanses, unforgiving climate, and the sheer scale of attrition, with losses mounting from mechanical failures as much as combat, revealing deep logistical flaws that no amount of Nazi engineering or Göring's bombast could fully mitigate. Meanwhile, the Red Army, bolstered by fresh Siberian divisions, acclimated to Arctic hardships and equipped with winter camouflage and skis, launched a counteroffensive in December 1941 under General Georgy Zhukov, pushing the Germans back from Moscow in a stunning reversal that shattered the aura of Nazi invincibility and inflicted over 900,000 casualties on the invaders. German soldiers, trapped in snowdrifts without proper boots or coats, sought warmth where they could, while Luftwaffe crews scavenged parts from wrecked planes amid howling winds, their morale plummeting as sorties dropped dramatically. This winter debacle not only cost the Germans dearly in men and machines, but also eroded the Luftwaffe's operational strength, with bomber fleets reduced by 40% and pilots. Facing exhaustion from constant defensive missions, setting the stage for the strategic shifts that would lead to Stalingrad. Undaunted by these setbacks and driven by his obsession with resources and symbolism, Hitler pivoted in the spring of 1942 to the southern front, launching Operation Blue to seize the oil-rich Caucasus Mountains and the symbolically vital city of Stalingrad on the Volga River. Named after Joseph Stalin himself, Stalingrad was more than a military objective. It was a psychological target aimed at the Soviet leader, a chokehold on the Volga supply lines that transported 80% of Soviet oil and grain, and a propaganda opportunity that could demoralize the Red Army while boosting German morale after the Moscow failure. The Sixth Army, commanded by the meticulous and by-the-book General Friedrich Paulus, was tasked with its capture, but the Luftwaffe would first soften the target with a massive bombing campaign, intending to disrupt defenses, supplies, and the will of its defenders before infantry advanced into the ruins. Luftwaffe airfields across the steppe buzzed with frantic activity. Stukas, He 111s, and Ju 88s loaded with bombs. Their crews, young men from across Germany, many veterans of earlier campaigns like the Battle of Britain or Crete, brimming with confidence that the city would crumble swiftly under their onslaught, as Warsaw and Rotterdam had before. Yet, unbeknownst to them, Stalingrad's defenders, a mix of soldiers from the 62nd Army, factory workers who had pivoted to producing weapons, women enlisting in anti-aircraft units, and even children acting as scouts, were preparing for a determined defense, transforming the impending destruction into a network of resistance that would challenge the invaders in urban warfare. On that fateful day, August 23, 1942, the Luftwaffe under Richthofen's Luftflotte 4 unleashed a major aerial operation upon Stalingrad, transforming a bustling metropolis of over 600,000 people into a heavily damaged area in mere hours, with over 1,600 sorties dropping 1,000 tons of bombs in what became the most intense aerial assault on the Eastern Front. Waves of bombers darkened the horizon, dropping their payloads with clinical precision. High explosives that cratered streets, toppled concrete structures like the tractor factory, and created massive debris fields. Incendiaries that ignited wooden homes, spreading flames that leaped from block to block in a voracious chain reaction fueled by winds from the steppe. Factories, icons of Soviet industry such as the Red October steel plant and Barakadi gun factory, collapsed into twisted heaps of steel and debris, while massive oil storage tanks ruptured, spilling rivers of burning fuel into the Volga, which glowed an eerie orange under a canopy of choking black smoke that blotted out the sun for days and disrupted navigation. As Antony Beevor describes in Stalingrad, this assault was intense and destructive, a calculated effort designed to weaken the city and force a quick resolution. Soviet air defenses, including the all-female 1077th Anti-Aircraft Regiment, Young women manning 37mm guns with courage despite no prior combat experience. Fired desperately into the swarm, their batteries blazing until ammunition depleted or positions were disrupted, downing a few planes but overwhelmed by the sheer numbers. The regiment's headquarters was lost in the opening salvos, leaving the skies largely undefended as Stukas dove with their signature screams. He 111s carpet bombed indiscriminately, and Bf 109 fighters strafed key areas. By nightfall, 90% of Stalingrad's housing lay in ruins, the city a sea of flames visible for miles across the steppe, smoke rising like a colossal funeral pyre, with the Volga itself aflame from spilled oil, sinking 32 ships and crippling 9 more in prior weeks. Personal accounts from survivors highlight the significant human impact, adding depth to the historical facts. Civilian Elena Ivanova, a mother with her 2 young children amid the chaos, later recounted, "The sky turned black with planes, endless waves of them droning like angry bees. Bombs fell like a biblical rain, shaking the earth. My home crumbled around us in a roar of dust and fire. I dragged my children into a crumbling basement where we huddled amid the sounds of the destruction." Adding to this, from witnesses like those ferrying across the Volga, one Soviet soldier described the crossings as constantly under threat by German pilots, with reinforcements arriving to a challenging sight of burning docks. A child survivor recalled being pulled from a bomb crater only for another wave to strike, forcing rescuers to seek cover amid renewed explosions. The death toll from this single day remains contested, with estimates ranging from 40,000 to 70,000 civilians affected and up to 150,000 wounded. Those Soviet records, fragmented by the pandemonium, suggest initial figures around 950 dead in the first few days. Yet the true scale, including those lost in the fires or rubble, may never be fully known, with overall civilian losses in the battle reaching 235,232. The Luftwaffe focused on industrial lifelines, the sprawling tractor factory, where workers had pivoted to producing T-34 tanks, the Red October steel plant, forging armor and munitions, and the Barricadi gun factory, crafting artillery pieces essential to the front, all hammered relentlessly to cripple Soviet production. Yet, the operation affected civilian areas as well, damaging schools, hospitals, and apartment blocks, creating debris fields and transforming neighborhoods into challenging environments. Soviet nurse Maria Petrova, tending patients in a makeshift clinic amid the barrage, scribbled in her diary, "We operated under falling bombs, the ground heaving like an earthquake, dust choking our lungs. I watched a child succumb to injuries, her tiny body going limp as her mother wailed beside her. Such scenes repeated in the Inferno, testing our humanity." Historian Chris Bellamy, in Absolute War, argues the Luftwaffe's strategy was to fracture Stalingrad's spirit and compel surrender before ground troops closed in, but it backfired spectacularly. Joseph Stalin's order, number 227, not a step back, demanded no retreat, no evacuation, binding civilians and soldiers in a shared, desperate fight for survival, where workers not producing weapons were thrust into combat and women dug anti-tank trenches under fire. Families sheltered in basements, rationing meager bread with weary troops. Workers at the tractor factory defied flames to assemble T-34 tanks that rumbled directly from lines to battle, crewed by untrained but fierce volunteers who learned on the fly. Children as young as 10 scampered through rubble, ferrying messages between positions under whistling bombs and sniper fire, while women mended uniforms, repaired weapons, and even took up arms in units like the Night Witches. Paradoxically, the bombing's intensity, intended to weaken, instead forged unbreakable bonds among defenders, civilians, and soldiers, drawing strength from mutual suffering and a determination to resist. As one survivor from the book Survivors of Stalingrad recalled, The bombs turned our homes to dust, but in that dust, we found our resolve. Every crater became a trench, every ruin a barricade, and every loss fueled our fight. The Luftwaffe's firestorm, meant to end the battle swiftly, instead sparked a grueling war of attrition, luring the Germans into an urban maze where streets morphed into battlefields and every shadow hid defiance, with the Volga remaining a contested lifeline for Soviet supplies. The Luftwaffe's relentless bombs reduced Stalingrad to a shattered wasteland of craters, skeletal buildings, and endless debris, but from these ruins emerged a new, determined form of warfare. One that the Germans, accustomed to open-field blitzkrieg with coordinated air and armor, were unprepared to wage effectively. Junkers Ju-87 Stukas pierced the skies with their eerie sirens, diving at near-vertical angles to deliver 500-pound bombs with surgical precision, targeting Soviet bunkers, anti-aircraft emplacements, and supply depots in a bid to dismantle the Red Army's fragile defenses and clear paths for infantry. Heinkel He 111 and Junkers Ju-88 bombers, laden with up to 4,400 pounds of ordnance, blanketed whole districts in high explosives and incendiaries, igniting fires that raged for days and filled the air with acrid, suffocating smoke that blinded pilots, ground troops, and even disrupted radio communications. By September, Luftflotte 4 had executed over 17,000 sorties, dropping thousands of tons of bombs. Estimates suggest around 5,000 tons by month's end, though overall campaign totals reached 100,000 tons, morphing Stalingrad into a smoldering labyrinth of rubble, twisted metal, hidden dangers, and improvised fortifications. The Germans anticipated this devastation would pave a clear path for the Sixth Army's advance, but the Soviets ingeniously weaponized the destruction itself, turning the Luftwaffe's handiwork against them. General Vasily Chuikov, the tenacious and innovative commander of the 62nd Army, issued orders to fortify every bombed-out structure, creating an intricate web of strong points that turned avenues into defensive zones and alleys into ambushes, a strategy he dubbed the Stalingrad Academy of Street Fighting. Chuikov's most daring tactic was hugging the enemy, ordering his troops to close within 50 meters or less of German positions, negating the Luftwaffe's air support and German artillery by making strikes too risky for friendly fire, forcing close-quarters combat where Soviet advantages in numbers and resolve shone. Beaver terms this rat warfare, or Rattenkrieg, a visceral, close-quarters challenge where Soviet troops, equipped with PPSH-41 submachine guns for rapid fire in confined spaces, grenades for clearing rooms, and homemade Molotov cocktails to disable tanks, trapped in narrow streets, fought room by room, floor by floor, nullifying the Germans' advantages in armor and artillery amid the claustrophobic chaos of rubble-strewn buildings. Soviet tanks like T-34s were dug into the debris as static pillboxes, their turrets protruding from ruins for ambush fire, unnerving German crews accustomed to maneuver warfare. Small squads of 6 to 8 soldiers operated autonomously, using sewers and attics for surprise attacks, with Chuikov emphasizing adaptability. Stay hidden behind rubble until the enemy tanks are right in front of you. If they're close, they can't use their main guns effectively. Soviet snipers like the legendary Vasily Zaitsev, immortalized as the ghost of Stalingrad, became mythic figures in the debris, with Zaitsev alone credited with 225 confirmed kills, his Mosin Nagant rifle whispering death from concealed perches in collapsed walls or attics, instilling fear in German ranks where soldiers dreaded every shadow. German pilot Hans Richter, who braved multiple missions over the Inferno, confided in his journal, "We flew up to 5 sorties a day, weaving through flak bursts and enemy fighters like a deadly ballet. The Soviets emerged from the ruins like phantoms, their guns unceasing. Each mission felt like tempting fate itself, with our bombs often hitting empty rubble while they hugged our lines." The Luftwaffe, masters of open skies, faltered in this urban quagmire. Precision strikes proved futile against dispersed, entrenched foes hidden in the wreckage, and pilots faced increasing threats from Soviet Yak-9 fighters and ground fire. Compounding the crisis, German supply lines, stretching over 1,000 miles from the fatherland through hostile territory, buckled under relentless strain. Fuel shortages grounded squadrons for days, spare parts vanished amid partisan sabotage, and exhausted crews resorted to cannibalizing wrecked aircraft to keep others aloft, with operational strength dropping by 40% from June to September. The Soviets countered with remarkable ingenuity, deploying the all-female 588th Night Bomber Regiment, dubbed Night Witches by Germans for their nocturnal raids in rickety Polikarpov. Po-2 biplanes, wooden relics that evaded radar by flying low and slow, their engines humming like sewing machines as they dropped small bombs, strafed positions, and harassed troops, depriving soldiers of sleep and eroding morale in the biting cold, with pilots like Nadezhda Popova completing over 850 missions. Soviet anti-aircraft crews, including the remnants of the 1077th Regiment, repositioned guns amid the debris, downing 91 Luftwaffe planes by September with pinpoint accuracy against low-flying Stukas, their all-female gunners earning medals for bravery under fire. As David Glantz outlines in Stalingrad trilogy, these tactics, rubble fortifications, nocturnal harassment, flak ambushes, and hugging eroded the Luftwaffe's vaunted superiority, dragging them into an unsustainable war of attrition where daily sorties fell from 1,343 to 975. Soviet defenders, from elite snipers to ordinary factory workers, held firm. Civilians aided soldiers in repairing tanks under fire, erecting barricades from debris, and hauling supplies across the Volga at night, despite Luftwaffe attempts to bomb ferries. Iconic bastions like the grain elevator, a towering concrete silo where a handful of Marines repelled waves of assaults for days, using machine guns and grenades from every level, and Pavlov's house, where Sergeant Yakov Pavlov's platoon defended a lone apartment block for 60 grueling days against tanks, infantry, and air strikes, their stand becoming a legend of defiance etched into Soviet folklore. The Luftwaffe's bombs, far from breaking Stalingrad, empowered its guardians, who wielded the ruins as both shield and sword, luring the invaders into a fatal embrace that drained the Sixth Army's resources. Over the entire Stalingrad campaign, the Luftwaffe dropped an estimated 20,000 to 30,000 tons of bombs. Far less than the often exaggerated 100,000 tons, but enough to scar the city indelibly and create a desolate wasteland that ensnared the Germans in a quagmire of their own design, where air power's limitations were laid bare. The rubble birthed a defender's dream. Chuikov's 62nd Army repurposed every shattered edifice into a fortress, compelling the 6th Army into excruciating house-to-house combat, where superior technology meant little against grit and proximity. Soviet fighters, wielding submachine guns for hallway sweeps, grenades for room clearances, and Molotovs to disable armored vehicles trapped in debris, battled from cellars, rooftops, and sewers, transforming streets into lethal gauntlets that drained the invaders and turned every advance into a Pyrrhic victory. Snipers like Zaitsev, the elusive Ghost, struck with chilling efficiency, amassing 225 kills and sowing dread. German troops hesitated to cross open ground, whispering of invisible reapers in the shadows, with duels like Zaitsev's against German Major Erwin Koenig becoming propaganda gold. German soldier Wilhelm Hoffmann's diary entry captures the despair. This city is a relentless challenge. We bombed it heavily, yet the Russians rose from every ruin like resilient spirits. This is not just warfare, this is a harsh test of endurance, where the cold and hunger gnaw as much as the bullets. Bellamy posits that Hitler's fixation on Stalingrad's symbolic value, named for his nemesis, diverted Luftwaffe assets from the Caucasus oil fields, starving the Reich's engines of vital fuel and overextending resources across fronts, with sorties prioritizing urban targets over strategic interdiction. The Luftwaffe's oversight in fully targeting Volga supply lines allowed Soviet ferries to slip through under night's veil, delivering reinforcements, rations, and munitions that sustained the besieged despite relentless attacks, with female pilots in biplanes dropping bombs on German positions to cover crossings. Civilians suffered most grievously. Of Stalingrad's pre-battle 700,000 residents, historian Tatiana Pavlova estimates 185,232 perished in the city alone, with another 50,000 in surrounding areas, totaling 235,232, a toll surpassing Hiroshima's atomic devastation and including tens of thousands forced into German labor. Women and children endured in sewers, basements, and makeshift dugouts, sharing scant morsels with troops, their existence a grim odyssey amid flames, frost, and disease like typhus that spread in the squalor. Stalin's Order 227 sealed their fate, forbidding flight and weaving their agony into the soldiers' struggle, with women digging trenches at the front and children scavenging for food amid rubble. Factory laborers, dodging shrapnel, persisted in T-34 production, tanks emerging from forges to clash immediately, manned by desperate novices who fired on the move. Overy observes that the Luftwaffe's tactics meant to demoralize, instead unified defenders in a shared, defiant resolve against the Nazi horde, with stories of female anti-aircraft gunners downing planes inspiring songs and medals. By October, the Sixth Army held 90% of the city, but at a ruinous price. 100,000 casualties, supply chains frayed by overextension, morale fracturing under ceaseless Soviet riposts and the onset of winter. The invaders, envisioning swift triumph, bogged down in debris where advances cost lives by the meter, with Luftwaffe pilots like those in Ju-52 transports facing exhaustion from multiple daily runs. Soviet holdouts, like the grain elevator, defended by a skeletal crew against hordes, using every floor as a firing position, and Pavlov's house, a 60-day epic of defiance where Pavlov's men repelled tanks with anti-tank rifles and grenades, embodied unbreakable spirit. The Luftwaffe's ordnance, intended for conquest, crafted a terrain favoring the tenacious, ensnaring Germans in an unwinnable grind that set the stage for encirclement. On November 19, 1942, the Red Army ignited Operation Uranus, a masterful counteroffensive meticulously planned by Generals Georgy Zhukov and Alexander Vasilevsky that ensnared the Sixth Army and laid bare the Luftwaffe's mortal frailties in sustaining prolonged operations. Uranus exploited the vulnerable Axis flanks, held by poorly trained, ill-equipped Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian troops lacking anti-tank weapons and motivation, launching a double pincer movement from the north and south to encircle Paulus's forces. Employing camouflage, nocturnal marches, deceptive radio chatter to mimic routine activity, and false intelligence plants, the Soviets masked their buildup of over 1 million troops, 1,500 tanks, and 1,400 aircraft from Luftwaffe reconnaissance, striking with complete surprise on fog-shrouded mornings. T-34 tanks, engineered for winter with broad tracks gripping snow and mud, thundered through Axis lines, backed by infantry swarms, Katyusha rocket barrages that demoralized defenders, and artillery that overwhelmed Romanian positions, shattering them in hours. By November 23rd, Soviet pincers converged at Kalach-on-Don, encircling 290,000 Axis troops, including the entire Sixth Army and parts of the 4th Panzer Army, in a 30-mile pocket, severing supplies, communications, and hope, with the encirclement completed in just 4 days, despite German attempts at counterattacks. Hitler rejecting retreat despite Paulus's pleas, commanded the Luftwaffe to airlift sustenance for the besieged, a reckless wager to preserve the salient and avoid admitting defeat. Göring pledged 500 tons daily of food, fuel, ammunition, and medical supplies. But the airlift, using Ju-52 transports and makeshift bombers like He-111s, fell short, delivering a paltry 94 tons average against the required 700 to 750 tons, hampered by blizzards, Soviet fighters, and the loss of key airfields like Tatsinskaya on December 24th, where 72 aircraft were destroyed on the ground. Soviet soldier Ivan Petrov reminisced, "German planes droned in low, laden with hope for their trapped comrades, but our guns roared without pause, guided by spotters in the ruins. We witnessed them plummet, cargo scattered in snowdrifts, winter allied with us, freezing engines and pilots alike." The Luftwaffe lost 495 aircraft from November the 24th, 1942 to January 31st, 1943, including 269 Ju-52s, 169 He-111s, and others, halving its transport fleet and hobbling multi-front support, with pilots facing exhaustion from up to 5 daily runs in sub-zero conditions. German soldier Fritz Weber lamented, "We devoured rats, then snow for sustenance. Men froze clutching family photos, their bodies rigid like statues. The airlift was a cruel deception. We were forsaken by promises unkept." Soviet flak, concealed in ruins and manned by units like the 1077th, felled low-flying haulers, while Yak-1 and Lag-3 fighters clashed in aerial duels, decimating German numbers and claiming aces like Lydia Litviak. Freezing engines failed, crews succumbed to exhaustion, frostbite, and crashes. Within the pocket, the Sixth Army suffered from lack of food, illness, and extreme cold, with soldiers rationing small amounts of bread, using melted snow for water, and enduring difficult conditions in the severe chill that dropped to -30 degrees Celsius. The airlift's collapse, exacerbated by Göring's overpromising and Hitler's refusal to authorize a breakout, doomed them as Soviets constricted the noose through Operation Little Saturn, pounding the pocket with artillery in prelude to resolution and preventing relief efforts like Operation Winter Storm. By January 1943, the Sixth Army, once 330,000 strong, dwindled to 91,000 weakened survivors affected by hunger, disease, and the harsh Russian winter that turned the pocket into a desolate landscape. Hitler, clutching at denial and propaganda, elevated Paulus to field marshal on January 30th, implying suicide over surrender, as no such rank had capitulated before in German history. Yet, on January 31st, Paulus yielded the southern pocket amid crumbling resistance, the northern following on February 2nd, 1943, etching one of the Reich's cataclysmic defeats, with Paulus captured alive in a department store basement. Of the 91,000 captives, a mere 5,000 to 6,000 endured Soviet prisons, as many did not survive due to illness, lack of food, long marches, and difficult working conditions in cold environments where extreme weather and harsh treatment took a toll. The Luftwaffe's airlift fiasco abandoned the Sixth Army to starvation amid snow as Soviet barrages sealed their end, with survivors like Friedrich Roske recounting short-lived triumphs turned to despair under counterattacks. Germany, learning of the rout in late January through controlled media, mandated 3 days mourning, a rare Nazi concession that rippled shock through the homeland, eroding faith in the regime. Joseph Goebbels' fiery total war oration on February 18th at Berlin's Sportpalast rallied for all-out mobilization, a frantic bid to rouse a nation confronting defeat's specter amid growing dissent. The battle's scale stunned. Up to 2 million casualties, 800,000 Axis, including 91,000 captured, 1.1 million Soviet, crowning Stalingrad history's bloodiest clash, with over 2 million engaged in close quarters. Soviet victors hoisted flags over ruins, their triumph igniting resolve for the Berlin push, culminating in May 1945, as Stalingrad boosted Allied morale and shifted the war's momentum. Stalingrad's guardians, soldiers, snipers, laborers, civilians transmuted rubble into bastions, proving resilience triumphs over ruin, with tactics like hugging influencing later urban battles like Berlin. The Luftwaffe's 1,000 tons of bombs on August 23, 1942, kindled a conflagration that redefined World War II, leaving an indelible legacy of fire, valor, tragedy, and strategic lessons that echoed through subsequent campaigns. Stalingrad demolished the Reich's conquest illusions, demonstrating even the mightiest air armada couldn't shatter a people's soul, and marked the Luftwaffe's decline, with losses crippling its ability to contest Allied bombings or support fronts. Renamed Volgograd, the city endures as a shrine to sacrifice. The towering motherland calls statue on Mamayev Kurgan, a hill fought over ferociously, memorializing 35,000 interred soldiers and civilians, its annual commemorations drawing survivors and descendants. The Luftwaffe's downfall exposed Hitler's strategic blunders, overdependence on air power, scorn for Soviet endurance, blindness to winter's wrath, and failure to secure flanks, influencing doctrines like deep battle adopted by the Red Army. Stalingrad resolves our queries. The Reich wagered bombs would vanquish will, but defenders forged fortresses from fragments. Ruins became might, empowering outmatched souls against odds. Buried secrets, tales of bravery, grief, endurance, echo war's human price, from child survivors to pilots' harrowing flights. Stalingrad testifies to the unyielding spirit enduring the Luftwaffe's 1,000 tons of hell, a resonant historical echo that shaped the Allies' path to victory. If this story inspired you, challenged you, or made you see World War II in a new light, we'd be honored to have you as part of our growing community. Subscribing isn't just a click. It's a way to support more powerful stories, more forgotten voices, and more truth from the past. So if you believe these stories matter, hit that subscribe button, and let's keep building this journey together. And don't forget to leave a comment. We read them all and love hearing your thoughts. Until next time. Keep exploring history with Epic War. Keep asking questions. Keep seeking the truth.